The storm was the kind of thing that made stories. The kind told by trembling voices over fires, the kind that claimed lives without reason and buried escape pods like bones under an avalanche. Senna's fingers were losing color. She could still move them, barely, but each motion felt like lifting stones from inside her own chest. The crash had been 76 minutes ago. Her survival pod had sealed on impact, a miracle in itself. But miracles, she was quickly learning, didn't last long in sub-zero windstorms on unnamed worlds. Her helmet registered oxygen at breathable levels, but only barely. The air was too thin, the temperature 46 degrees below Verdi threshold, and the only thing in sight for kilometers was snow and jagged stone. Her visor flickered. A heartbeat later, it died completely. She pulled off her helmet, teeth clenched as the cold air hit her lungs like glass. Her species, Verdeans, weren't built for this. They came from rainforest moons, green-choked canopies, hot springs that steamed the air. Not snow. Not ice. Not this kind of silence. Senna stumbled forward, one leg dragging slightly behind the other. Her thigh had hit something hard in the crash, probably a strut, but there wasn't time to look. Her only working scanner beeped once, faint and uneven, like the last breath of a dying bird. Life. 0.3 kilometers. Not much. But hope never had to be big. Just enough. The cabin was nearly buried in snow, only the edge of the roof peeking out like a forgotten blade in a drift. Smoke curled from a crooked chimney, sluggish and half-hearted. A power signature, flickering with solar backfeed. She dragged herself across the last hill, boots slipping on an incline of ice. By the time she reached the door, her eyes were unfocused. Her arm barely moved. She knocked. Once. Not loud. Then the world faded. When she woke, her body was heat and ache and too many layers of unfamiliar scent. Wood smoke. Metal. Something herbal, bitter at the edge. She was on a bed, if a flat, scratchy surface with wool blankets counted. Her hands were free. Her boots had been removed, and a blanket was tucked up to her chin. A man sat across the room, chair tilted back, 1 foot on a workbench. Human. Tall. Worn around the edges like a tool that had seen one life too many. He didn't say anything at first. Neither did she. Then. You're awake. His voice was rough with silence. Senna blinked at him, throat dry. I thought you might die, he added. Not yet, she rasped. Good. Pause. I made tea. Another pause. Not sure if Verdeans drink tea. She managed a slow nod. We do. He poured her a cup, walked over, and handed it to her without ceremony. His hands were calloused. Fingers marked by scars and time. Hers were still tinged pale blue, recovering circulation. The ceramic was hot. She didn't drink immediately. She studied him. He was younger than he looked. Maybe early 30s, but the way he moved, the set of his shoulders, he'd been through things. What's your name? She asked. Ryle, he said. Yours? Senna. He nodded like he already knew it. The first night, she couldn't sleep. Not because of pain, though there was some, but because the silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything she hadn't said since the crash. Regrets. Questions. Ghosts. She stared at the wooden ceiling of the cabin, each beam weathered and split. There were no electronics except a dim lantern powered by a wind battery. No screens. No broadcasts. Outside, the wind had slowed to a low moan. Inside, Ryle slept on a cot near the fireplace, body curled toward the warmth like an old animal. In the dark, Senna whispered, "Thank you." He didn't respond. But she had the strangest feeling he'd hurt her. Days passed like pages in a forgotten journal. Senna grew stronger. She learned Ryle's patterns. He woke early, even before the light filtered through the ice-crusted windows. Boiled water. Checked the perimeter of the cabin, some kind of instinct, maybe. Habit from another life. He had a rifle. Old model. The kind no one used unless they were too far off-grid to afford something smarter. He didn't ask questions. He didn't touch her. He didn't look at her for too long. But he always made sure there was something hot waiting when she woke. On the 6th day, she stood without wobbling. On the 7th, she walked the perimeter with him, slowly, wrapped in borrowed thermals stitched for a frame larger than hers. "How long have you been here?" she asked. He didn't answer for a while. 3 winters. Alone. That was the point. Senna nodded. She understood the shape of that ache. They walked in silence. Until she said, "I can help. You don't have to do this alone." Ryle glanced at her. Not a long look. Just enough to register something like surprise. Or something softer. "We'll see." On the 9th day, he handed her a spade. "Ground's thawed enough near the thermal vent," he said. "Thought we could dig a trench." "What for?" "You'll see." She did. They uncovered something like a greenhouse. Old structure. Mostly intact. He'd built it years ago. Abandoned it after his last crop failed. Senna crouched near the roots of a dormant plant and brushed away snow with gentle fingers. "These aren't dead," she murmured. "They looked at last winter. They're just waiting." He didn't reply. But he stood closer than usual that day. On the 11th day, Senna played his instrument. The notes were uneven at first. Her hands still trembled. But she found a rhythm. Not a song from Verdi. A new one. Hers. His. He didn't speak while she played. But when she finished, he said, quietly, "That sounded like memory." She smiled. "Maybe it is." They began eating meals together at the small table near the window. The snow outside turned to slush, sunlight trickling down like mercy. They talked. About anything but the past. Then one night, without planning to, she said, "I lost someone too." Ryle looked up. "Not to death," she added. "To distance. To time. To decisions I wish I hadn't made." "That's death enough." She nodded. "He was a researcher," she said. "Like me. But he chose another posting. Somewhere warmer. Somewhere with a future. We told ourselves we'd try. But I think we both knew we wouldn't." Ryle said nothing. Just refilled her tea. But the silence between them that night wasn't empty. It was shared. On the 15th day, she found him staring at the old map again. It was pinned to the back wall. A full sector scan of the outer rim colonies, with faint routes marked in red. One went through the Verdi moons. Another past Elion Prime. "You were Fleet," she said. "Used to be. Why leave?" He shrugged. "Orders stopped making sense. People died. Too many. So you disappeared. I prefer retired in protest." "They let you?" He smiled, grim and crooked. "They couldn't stop me." Senna looked at him. Really looked. "You saved me," she said, softly. "Maybe you saved me." They didn't kiss until the 17th day. She was reaching for a bundle of herbs on the upper shelf. Her balance wobbled. Her knee gave a little. Ryle caught her, arms around her waist before she could fall. They froze. His breath against her neck. Her hands on his chest. Time stopped. Then, her fingers curled into the fabric of his sweater. "I've been waiting to feel this warm since the crash," she whispered. You're not the only one. He kissed her. Slow. Unsure. But true. And she kissed him back like she'd found the one place in the universe that didn't ask for explanation. That night, they didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The cabin was silent, but it was no longer cold. On the 22nd day, the comms relay crackled. Senna stared at the console, heart-lurching. Signal detected, it said. Verdi diplomatic emergency channel. She looked at Ryle. He didn't flinch. You should respond, he said. Do you want me to? He met her eyes. I want you to choose. She turned back to the console. Paused. And powered it off. I've spent years choosing what everyone else wanted me to choose, she said, turning to him. This time, I choose you. He didn't smile. But he stepped forward, touched her cheek, and said. Then stay. I will. And somewhere outside, the snow began to melt. Not fast. But enough. Because sometimes, love doesn't arrive with grand gestures. Sometimes, it knocks once. And waits for someone brave enough to answer. The storm passed 2 days ago, but the silence it left behind was louder than the thunder ever was. Caleb hadn't spoken in weeks. Not since the cargo ship he'd stowed away on had burned in orbit, scattering debris like ash across the sky. He'd ejected in an old emergency suit, barely functional, and had landed on this moon by accident. By miscalculation. Or maybe fate. He didn't believe in that, usually. But then again, most moons didn't sing. This one did. Not loudly. Not with voices. But through the strange, green pulses that came from beneath the surface. A kind of hum in the bones. Like the memory of music. The air was breathable. Barely. Too much methane, too little heat. But the field he walked across shimmered faintly under the weak sun, and that was something. More than most places had offered lately. Caleb stumbled down a ridge, boots torn at the seams, rations gone. His last drink had been recycled water from a rain trap. He was ready to give up. Until he saw the orchard. It shouldn't have existed. Not here. Not on a forgotten moon at the edge of the shattered rim. But there it was. Row after row of delicate trees, pale silver bark twisted around lines of copper pipe. They stood in straight formation beneath a transparent dome, ancient glass panels, half cracked but functional. Vines threaded through irrigation tubes. The roots pulsed softly, fed by geothermal vents below. And at the center, a tall spire covered in moss and solar film. Caleb stood at the edge of the dome, swaying. Then, his vision folded inward. And everything went black. When he woke, something smelled like warm earth and citrus. He blinked. He was inside the dome now, inside the orchard. Beneath the trees. Something soft supported his head. A bed of moss. Maybe fabric. He couldn't tell. He tried to sit up. A hand gently pressed him back down. Not yet, said a voice. Quiet. Female. He blinked up into a face with sharp cheekbones, a mess of dark curls, and eyes the color of river stone. You're dehydrated, she said. Concussed. Lucky you didn't collapse near the aerator fans. Caleb tried to speak, but his throat felt like sand. She held a tube to his lips. Water. Crisp, cold, slightly sweet. He drank. Too fast. Coughed. She waited until he stopped, then pulled back, evaluating him. What were you doing out there? She asked. Crash. Figured. Saw the flare trail. Thought it was a meteor until it veered west. You live here? He asked, voice a whisper. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood. And walked away. Her name was Nyari. She told him that much on the second day, after feeding him broth made from hydroponic root vegetables and flavored with something tangy he couldn't name. Nyari Delva, she said, research botanist. Or I was. What changed? Everything. That was all she offered. Calum didn't push. He recognized the walls she kept up. Not because she was hostile, but because the quiet felt safer to her than explaining the scars. He knew the feeling. He'd spent most of his adult life drifting between fractured colonies, patching together old comms relays, moving from outpost to outpost. Never long enough to attach. Always just enough to survive. But now, he didn't want to move. Not yet. Not with her. The orchard dome was old. The station it belonged to was older. Nyari showed him its systems one afternoon when he offered to help with maintenance. The solar panels were cracked but still functional. The irrigation system was delicate, easily thrown off balance, but she had it tuned perfectly. This was a terraforming project, she explained, her hands moving across the console like a pianist over keys. Abandoned after funding was cut. And you stayed. Someone had to protect it. He raised an eyebrow. Why? She paused. Then, softly, because no one else remembered it was here. He discovered she sang when she thought he was asleep. Late at night, when she checked the nutrient meters or recalibrated the root sensors, she hummed under her breath. Soft, wordless tunes that reminded him of lullabies. He said nothing. But once, he heard her slip into words. You were the light in the orchard, the sun through the leaves, the sound of wind I could never believe. Her voice cracked. Then stopped. He pretended to be asleep. A week passed. Calum began helping with the daily routines. Trimming the roots, inspecting filtration, clearing fungus from sensor bulbs. Nyari didn't smile much, but when she did, it was always unexpected, and somehow warmer than sunlight. You're not just a drifter, are you? She asked one morning, watching him rewire a damaged junction box. Calum shrugged. I've been called worse. You know what you're doing. I've patched worse. Pause. Why'd you stay? She asked. Crash, he said simply. Nowhere else to go. That's not the only reason. He met her eyes. No, he admitted. It's not. On the 10th night, they walked the orchard together. Nyari moved like someone used to silence, like she belonged in the gaps between words. Calum let her lead, trailing fingers along branches heavy with glowing fruit. They weren't supposed to fruit yet, she said, voice distant. The program projected a 5-year delay. But something changed. They adapted. Evolved faster. They responded to you, Calum said. She looked over, startled. You stayed, he said. You sang to them. You gave them something to hold on to. That's not how it works. Maybe not in theory, he said. But I've seen stranger things. Nyari stared at one of the trees, her fingers brushing a low-hanging leaf. I didn't think anyone else could see it, she whispered. The way things grow here. The way they feel. I do, Calum said. Why? Because I feel it too. When you're near. They didn't kiss that night. But they stood too close for too long. And didn't move away. The next morning, Nyari found him staring at the orchard central spire. There's a signal emitter in there, she said. Still functional. I know. You could use it. I could. Do you want to? He looked at her. Not yet. She didn't smile. But her shoulders relaxed. Just a little. On the 14th day, a pipe burst. One of the geothermal conduits overheated, roots had grown too dense around the thermal regulators. Nyari panicked. Calum didn't. He moved fast, diving into the crawlspace beneath the orchard floor, steam scalding the back of his hand as he twisted the valve. The hiss of pressure equalizing was the sweetest sound he'd heard in weeks. When he climbed back up, dirty and bleeding, Nyari met him with wide eyes. "You're insane." "Probably. But that would have destroyed the irrigation. That's why I fixed it. You didn't have to." He stepped closer. "I know." And then, finally, she kissed him. It wasn't graceful. Her fingers tangled in his torn shirt, his hands unsure at first, then firm as they found her waist. Their lips met, hesitant, then urgent. Like two people who'd forgotten how to want, learning again by instinct. The dome's dim light bathed them in green. The orchard hummed. They lay together in the bed that night, not speaking. Her head on his chest. His hand in her curls. No promises. No labels. Just breath. And skin. And silence that didn't hurt. "I thought this place was mine to protect," Nyari whispered. "It still is," Calum said. "You're just not alone anymore. I don't know how to share it." "You don't have to." Pause. "Just let me walk with you." The next day, they rebuilt the regulator valve together. And later, she showed him the roots under the spire. "They're deeper than the original blueprints," she said. "It's like they found their own path." Maybe they did. Maybe we all do. On the 20th day, the signal emitter activated by itself. Calum was the first to hear it. A long-range ping from a scout vessel, Coalition class. Nyari paled. "They'll come back. Maybe. They'll take the orchard. Remove it. Break it down. They always do." Calum touched her arm. "Not if we don't answer." "But. This place was forgotten once," he said. "We don't have to let them remember it." Nyari looked at him. "You'd stay. If you want me to." "What about your life?" "This is my life now." They didn't reply to the signal. They disabled the transponder. And under the orchard canopy, Nyari planted a new seed. Not alone. Not anymore. In the deep quiet between stars, some stations forget they're still alive. The outpost had no name. Not anymore. It had once been called Relay Sigma 28, part of a string of emergency repeaters on the edge of the silence belt, a dead zone of space where signals went to die. Most of the string had collapsed decades ago. Most people didn't care. But June did. She lived there. Alone. Her only company, static, stars, and ghosts in the wires. June's job was simple. Monitor pulse bands. Document irregularities. Submit monthly transmissions to the Coalition's archival hub. Most of the time, the logs were empty. Except when they weren't. Because every few weeks, something strange happened. Not a signal. Not a voice. Just a pulse. One long tone, too regular to be noise. Too faint to be human. Too old to trace. And she wasn't sure why, but it always came when she felt the most alone. She first heard the impact at 3:46 station time. The silence outside had been absolute. Then the outpost shuddered, just slightly, like it had sighed. She checked seismic readings, nothing. Orbital collisions, negative. Then she checked the exterior cams. And saw a body. Half buried in ash snow. Tangled in metal. Still. By the time she reached the airlock, June's hands were shaking. Not from fear. From adrenaline. From hope, maybe. The body was human-shaped. Mostly. Parts of the suit were melted. Wiring exposed. Metal grafts where limbs used to be. A courier suit. Long-distance jump class. Cybernetic. Alive. Barely. She dragged him in, set the chamber to equalize, and began cutting away damaged fabric with tools meant for hardware, not people. Beneath the suit, burns. Synth muscle. Wires twitching like nerves. He groaned once, just before slipping back under. But he was breathing. And June hadn't heard another person's breath in 7 months. When he woke, the lights were low. A storm rolled across the outpost's upper atmosphere, radioactive dust and frozen crystals. A beautiful, lethal swirl. He blinked at her once. Tried to sit up. Groaned. "Don't," she said. "You'll rip the seal on your back." His eyes were green. Not natural. Enhanced. Flickering faintly. Station. Relay Sigma 28. Pause. Still operational. Barely. Another pause. He blinked again, slower. "You saved me." "Yeah." "Why?" "Because you were there." "Not reason enough." She shrugged. "It was for me." His name was Cecil. No last name. Or maybe he'd forgotten it. He said it like it didn't matter. June didn't press. He healed slowly. Cybernetic bodies weren't like human ones. Some parts regenerated. Others needed replacement. And the outpost didn't have much in the way of spare components. But June improvised. She'd always been good at improvising. "You used to be fleet," she asked one evening, watching him adjust the broken servos in his left hand. "Courier." "Unaligned." "Independent contractor." "Same thing." "Not really." "Why were you near the belt?" He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "Why are you here?" "Because no one else wanted to be." "You volunteer for loneliness?" She looked away. "I volunteered for silence." They fell into a rhythm. She ran diagnostics. Logged interference. He explored the maintenance tunnels. Helped recalibrate the dying generators. His hands moved like memory. Not fluid, but practiced. Like he'd spent years doing things he didn't believe in, but learned anyway. June watched him fix a junction box one morning and realized something strange. She felt safer with him there. Not because he was strong. But because he never filled the silence unless it needed to be. On the 12th night, a solar flare cut power to the southern wing. June grabbed her coat and sprinted into the cold, blue light of the emergency corridors. She found Cecil already there, crouched beside the failing node. "You don't sleep," she panted, leaning against the wall. "Not often." "Why not?" "Sleep is." He paused. "Then, dangerous." "Why?" He didn't answer. Instead, he touched the control panel and rerouted the circuit. Lights returned. But the question lingered. That night, she dreamt of him. Not his body. His voice. Low. Steady. Calling her name like it was something sacred. They didn't talk about it the next morning. They just worked. Side by side. Like something had shifted but didn't need to be said. On the 15th day, the pulse came again. Long. Clear. June recorded it, as always. But this time, Cecil stiffened. "You hear that?" he asked. "Yeah. That's not static." "I know. That's a distress beacon. I've never been able to trace it." "Because you weren't supposed to." She looked at him. "What does that mean?" "It means." He turned to her, expression unreadable. "I think it's mine." They argued. Not loudly. But with weight. "You need to trace it," he said. "I've tried." "You weren't trying to find it. You were keeping it alive." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" She looked away. And didn't answer. Later that night, he apologized. Sort of. He sat beside her in the comms room, watching the spectral graph flicker. I didn't mean to accuse you. Yes, you did. I didn't mean to hurt you. She nodded. What is it? She asked after a while. The signal? Yes. A location marker, he said, for a prison transport. Classified. Black flight. You were on it? I was guarding it. Pause. Then something went wrong. And now? I think I'm the only one left. She leaned back in her chair, arms folded across her chest. You're not. He looked at her. Really looked. You believe me? I believe you're not lying. Pause. And even if you are, I still want you to stay. He didn't kiss her. Not yet. But that night, he sat beside her while she slept in the control room. And watched the storm pass. On the 18th day, they lost contact with the outer beacon. A microburst had hit it dead on, frying the relay. We need to fix it manually, June said. Too dangerous. Then we lose signal integrity. What if we just let it fail? She stared at him. And realized. He wasn't talking about the beacon. They suited up at dawn. Hiked across the frozen ridge where signal towers rose like broken bones from the ash. June's fingers were numb by the time they reached the array. She opened the panel. Began rerouting. Cecil stood behind her, scanning the sky. Then. You scare me. She froze. What? You scare me, he repeated. Because I didn't think anything could pull me back. And? You did. They fixed the beacon. But the silence between them wasn't cold anymore. Back in the outpost, they stripped off the suits. The airlock hissed shut. He turned to her. And kissed her. No warning. Just contact. Her lips against metal-scarred skin. Warm. Real. His hands hesitant. Then sure. Her breath caught in her throat, and she pressed into him, heart pounding. Like a signal. Like a pulse. Alive. They made love that night in the generator room, surrounded by the hum of power and the smell of ozone. Not rushed. Not desperate. Just, needed. Shared. Afterward, they lay tangled in blankets and wires. His hand traced circles on her shoulder. This doesn't make sense, he whispered. I don't care. Me neither. On the 21st day, the pulse came again. Clearer. Sharper. Cecil decoded it. A ship. Approaching. No markings. No ID. Just silence. They found me, he said. What will they do? Erase me. Not if I stop them. He looked at her. And saw fire in her eyes. They prepared. Rewired the defense grid. Rerouted power. Shut down all transmissions. When the ship entered orbit, they cloaked the outpost. Waited. Watched. The ship passed. Slow. Then disappeared. They didn't speak for a while after. Just held hands in the dark. Listening to the heartbeat of the planet beneath them. They'll come again, he said. So we hide? No, June whispered. We live. They said the ocean of Velinara had no bottom. Not even the deep mech probes sent from the central ring reached anything but pressure collapse. Beneath the surface was black water, endless and ancient. But above was something else. Floating cities, woven from shipwrecks and satellite ruins. Sails of solar film and hulls lined with coral-grown steel. Nomad clans who followed currents instead of governments, tides instead of orders. Oren was one of them. He was born on a sail deck, raised in a half-submerged rig that hummed with tidal engines and gull song. He'd never touched real soil. Never wanted to. The sea was enough. Until the sky fell. And someone fell with it. It happened during a monsoon shift. Oren's crew had anchored near the drift stacks, hoping to trade biofuel for dried protein and calm fluid. They were sorting salvage, old satellite panels and half-melted NAV buoys, when the alert beacon lit up. Object inbound, called Sela from the crow's perch. Not debris. Pod. Angle, Oren asked. Steep. Burning. They all watched it streak through the clouds, trailed by plasma and flame. It hit the ocean a few kilometers off, vanished in a plume of steam, then bobbed back, miraculously intact. Someone inside was alive. It's coalition tech, Sela warned. You sure? If someone survived that fall, Oren said, already pulling on his rebreather, we can't leave them. And if it's a trap? He hesitated. Then looked out over the endless sea. Then it's my mistake to make. The pod was cracked but stable. He cut through the hatch with a salvage torch, braced for hostility. What he found inside wasn't a soldier. It was a girl. Barely conscious, face bruised, breathing shallow through a collapsed emergency mask. Her clothes were diplomatic, torn and seawater soaked. A seal on her shoulder, a crest he didn't recognize. Her eyes opened when he touched her shoulder. Who? Safe now, he said. No, they'll come. She passed out before he could ask who. Her name was Valari. She didn't tell him that right away. She told him her name was Liao. That she'd been on a shuttle fleeing a skirmish near the border moons. That she wasn't important. Oren knew a lie when he heard one. But he let her keep it. The first night, she curled in the bunk he cleared for her and stared at the shifting lights on the ceiling, reflections from water sloshing in the ballast tanks. You live like this? Yeah. Floating. Always. Don't you ever want something solid beneath you? Why? She didn't answer. Oren kept his distance at first. Not out of distrust. Out of respect. She flinched when the rig engines rumbled. Jumped at loudspeakers. Didn't sleep more than an hour at a time. But she helped. Quietly. Efficiently. Sorting nets. Sealing cracks. Studying tidal maps with the same focus he'd seen in veteran storm readers. By the fourth day, she smiled at him for the first time. A real one. Small. Tired. But real. You have the hands of someone who's never fixed anything mechanical in their life, he teased as she fumbled with a rusted stabilizer. I've fixed diplomatic relations between 3 planetary factions, she muttered, I can handle this. Same thing, really. Just less fire suppression foam. She laughed. And he realized he liked the sound. They made port at Drift Point 7, a tangle of barges and shanties floating on storm anchors. Oren traded for dried fish, engine coolant, and 2 preserved apples. Valari held the apple like it was treasure. I haven't tasted one of these since I was a kid. You were a kid yesterday. Funny. You didn't deny it. You didn't either. They ate on the top deck under a sun-veiled sky, the clouds purple with ozone and salt. You haven't asked who I really am, she said. Don't need to. Don't you care? Not if you're here now. She looked at him for a long time. Then said, my name is Valari Ivan Dan. I'm the daughter of Ambassador Danari. My shuttle was shot down by separatists during a peace summit breach. If they know I'm alive, they'll come for me. Are you asking me to hide you? I'm asking if I can stay. Then stay. No hesitation. Just warmth. Like the sea in late summer. He showed her how to read the current lines. How to watch for sky bruises, signs of cyclone births. How to balance on the rail when the wind hit just right. You're not like I expected, she said one evening. What did you expect? A pirate. Still might be. She laughed, leaned back on the deck, hair splayed like seaweed. I don't want to leave. He didn't answer. But he didn't look away, either. On the 12th day, a recon drone passed overhead. High. Sleek. Silent. Valari froze. Oren pulled her below deck. Neither spoke. But they didn't sleep that night. You should go deeper, she said in the morning. Cut engines. Drift. If they're searching, they'll sweep the trenches eventually. You've done this before. Hit people. Run from soldiers. He gave a small smile. Never had a reason to before. On the 14th day, the storm came. Not just rain. A system breaker. Hull snapping. Mast shearing. They battened down, locked everything, tied themselves into harnesses. But still. A wave breached the side deck. Threw Valari against the bulkhead. Oren pulled her out, barely conscious, bleeding from her scalp. Stay with me, he shouted. I'm not. She whispered, eyes unfocused. I'm not supposed to be here. You're here. They'll come for me. Let them. When the storm passed, the rig was damaged but afloat. Valari was stable. Oren sat by her bunk, hand in hers. When her eyes opened, she said, You stayed. Always. I'm scared. Me too. But I want to stay scared with you. He kissed her then. Gently. Carefully. But without doubt. And when she kissed him back, it wasn't fear that moved in her chest. It was hope. They repaired the ship together. Bit by bit. As she healed, so did the sails. The sky returned to blue-gray. The sea stilled. I don't know what this is, she said one evening, standing beside him at the bow. A ship. Us. Something worth finding. But I have to go back. Eventually. Then I'll go with you. You'd leave the sea. No. He turned to her, took her hand. But you're part of it now. They left Drift Point behind. Sailed east. Toward something they couldn't name. But together. Always together. There were no stars here. Not because it was night. But because this planet had no sky. Only clouds. And beneath them, stone arches older than recorded history, stretching across cracked land like the ribs of some forgotten beast. Leary stood beneath one now, her gloved hand resting against the weathered surface. The arch vibrated faintly, like it was breathing. You feel it too, came a voice behind her. She turned. Fun. He was wrapped in a scavenger's cloak, dust clinging to the fabric. Tall. Lean. The kind of man who looked like he didn't belong anywhere, and had learned to live with it. She nodded. Yes. He stepped closer. Then we're not crazy. I never said we weren't. Leary was a dream mapper. An obsolete profession, mostly. Her job had once been to trace cognitive echoes across psychometric networks, patterns in collective memory used to guide settlement design, deep space navigation, even diplomatic de-escalation. But after the collapse of the third network, dream mapping was labeled soft science. She kept doing it anyway. Because the dreams didn't stop. Not hers. Not the ones that kept leading her back to this planet. To the arches. To him. They'd met in a supply station on the edge of the Tellerus Drift. She was studying dream traces in abandoned terraform stations. He was bartering for engine coolant with a forged access key. He'd asked her why she was staring at him. She'd told him he had an arch in his memory field. Everyone has memories, he said. Not like that. She showed him a scan, psychometric flare like a fingerprint in his neural lattice. Perfect symmetry. Same pattern she'd seen in her own dreams. They stared at each other for a long time. Then he said. You need a guide. And she said. You need a map. Now, 2 months later, they stood together beneath the first gate. It hummed when they got close. Didn't activate. But it noticed them. They felt it. In their teeth. In their bones. My father found one of these, Fun said quietly, brushing dust from a carved rune. Years ago. Before they exiled him. Exiled for what? Believing they were real. The gates? The voices behind them. They camped that night in the hollow of a shattered column. The stars, when the clouds thinned, were dim. Too far. Like memories of light rather than light itself. Leary stared at them anyway. You think the gates are doors? She asked. No. Then what? Fun didn't answer immediately. He crouched by the fire, feeding it a handful of dry moss. The glow painted his face gold and shadow. I think they're mirrors. Of what? Us. Our choices. Our ruins. She studied him. You always talk like that. Only around people who listen. You think I'm listening? He looked at her. Yes. They didn't sleep close, but they didn't sleep far. Morning came cold, the kind that clung to joints. They walked until the arches began to pulse more often, subtle vibrations every 100 meters. Like something was keeping pace with them beneath the crust. I think they're connected underground, Leary said. Fun nodded. They're not just old. They're alive. They found the gate at sunset. Not a half-buried fragment, but a complete one, standing between two cliffs, surrounded by cracked earth and nothing else. It shimmered. Barely. A ripple, like heat over metal. This is it, Leary whispered. We don't know what happens if we cross, Fun said. We never do. You could leave. So could you. Neither moved. That night, they didn't set a fire. Too risky. Too bright. But they did sit beside each other, backs against the base of the gate, watching the shimmer grow stronger. What do you see when you dream? He asked. Voices calling from behind the stone. Names I don't remember. Sometimes yours. Mine. Before I knew you. Fun stared at the shimmer. I saw you, too. You believe in fate. I believe in patterns. Pause. I believe some connections don't need explanations. She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. They kissed for the first time in the dark. Soft. Tentative. Like the first brush of wind before a storm. And afterward, they didn't speak. Just held each other. Not because they were afraid. But because silence meant safety. In the morning, the shimmer formed a shape. An archway inside the arch. Glowing faint blue. Fun stood first. This is your map. And your gate. So we go together. If we go at all. Do you want to? Leary hesitated. I want to know. So do I. They stepped through. Light. Too bright. Then. Nothing. Then. Everything. A space, not a space. Not a room. Not a planet. Just presence. Voices not spoken. Images not seen. Memories from before. A tower burning. A child watching stars fall. A planet flooding. A hand holding another through it all. And at the center. A gate with no exit. Until Leary stepped forward. And it opened. She woke gasping. Fun beside her, eyes wide. They were on a plateau. Lush. Green. Alive. Archways in every direction. But different now. Open. Not one shimmered. Not one waited. They'd all already opened. What is this? She whispered. Fun held her hand tightly. I think it's a choice. They walked to the center of the arches. Found an old platform covered in moss and stone etchings. A place of convergence. Of beginning. The gates don't lead to new places, Leary said. They lead to understanding. Or endings. Or both. Fun knelt by a broken tablet. Traced its surface. Found their names. We were always coming here, he said. And now. We decide. They stayed in that place for 6 days. Exploring. Cataloging. Listening. No broadcasts. No threats. Only peace. On the 7th day, a new arch formed at the edge of the plateau. Not shimmering. But waiting. Do we go through? Leary asked. Do you want to? I want to stay. I want to know what we'd find. I want to go. I want everything. Then take me. She looked at him. I am everything, he said. And you are mine. They stepped through the arch together. This time, they didn't wake in another place. They woke in each other's arms. On the same plateau. Beneath a sky slowly clearing. A single star shining through. Maybe not real. Maybe only memory. But warm enough.